Hey, everybody, please remember to subscribe, like, and share.
Chris Pete's back here tonight, my man. Himself and the boys, Dr. Lucas Wilder, who's been sick for a few weeks. We're glad to have him back. Lucas, my man, how are you?
I'm doing just fine, Chris. Happy to be back. Happy to be among the living, it feels like. I was laid up for about a week, so I'm very much happy to be out talking to you and everybody else out there.
Here we are. It's the almost the anniversary of. Well, actually, there was some skirmishing took place on today, I believe, right?
Yeah.
With the Battle of Gettysburg.
Yeah, the official start date is just 2 days away for the 169th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg, July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And this entire 2 weeks I'm dedicating to Gettysburg on my channel, Have History Will Travel. This week I've actually went in and read the official report from Colonel Arthur Fremantle on what he saw the first, second, and third days. The third day's description was released just a few minutes ago at 7 o'clock this day on Wednesday, June 29th. So, and next week I've got two animated battle maps coming out, both on one on McPherson's Ridge, and the other one is the opening shots, first opening salvos. So it's Buford, and when the first corps starts coming up for the very first time, I've got those animated battle maps coming out next week. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, especially about McPherson's Ridge. You know, other things we never hear talk about much. So let me give my first question. Since you mentioned the opening shots there, I put it on my line. So he was going to Harrisburg. They was looking for shoes. There was a meeting engagement. Just where was he going? Gordon was all the way to Wrightsville. That was 42 miles away. I believe Early was at Harrisburg. His army was spread all over high heavens. But what was he doing? Just to me, like he was stumbling around just looking for the Union Army.
He was not particularly looking for the Union Army. I say that kind of broadly. One of his main reasons for going in Pennsylvania is actually looking for horses. His horses were really wore down at this point during the war. By 1863, horses pulling artillery and for his cavalry were dilapidated. He needed horses. He needed food for those horses as well. Northern Virginia had been a war zone for 2 years at that point, and so all the resources, all the forage that those horses would need are gone. So one reason Lee is going into Pennsylvania is to look for forage for his horses and his men, but horses is very much on his mind, and physically getting new horses to be able to bring with him back to Virginia so that he can pull more artillery. He actually at one point has to leave some artillery behind that he could have brought with him because he didn't have the horses to actually pull the cannons themselves.
So this is a knockout punch, like some people think he's looking for when he's going to Northern Soil. He's just looking for some horses.
Well, he is wanting to engage the Union Army and hopefully defeat them on northern soil, but you cannot forget and you cannot leave out the fact that one of his main objectives is getting horses in Pennsylvania. That's one of his biggest reasons for leaving Northern Virginia, and he's hoping to hopefully let the citizens of Northern Virginia be able to plant their crops. I know it's in June, but you can still plant some crops by that point. And so he's hoping that we can get more stuff in the ground, and that for the next campaign season, if it does happen, to have more food to live off of, more forage to be going out. So yeah, one of his reasons is to engage the Union Army, but his men and his horses are in desperate need of food and you want to enlist more horses into the Confederate war effort by going in Pennsylvania. And one reason he would be going towards Carlisle, not too far from Harrisburg, is that's where the cavalry training camp for the United States Army was. So they would have had horses there. And Lee knew that because Lee was the superintendent of West Point, and he was part of the 2nd Cavalry. he was, I mean, he knew that that would have been a viable option. Although that did get changed a little bit, but there was would have been forces in that area that he knew he could have capitalized on.
So, what kind of victory was he looking for? Was he looking for, like, second Manassas type victory? What happened at Chickamauga? Was he just needing just the slightest wind to set off up north, rioting citizens, and mass chaos, and the man to the end of the war? I mean, does he need a major victory, or does a minor one do that?
Most of war commanders had a viewpoint of a battle of annihilation. Most of the war commanders had that mentality. So I would be lying if I didn't say that Lee wanted a major victory that completely destroyed the Union Army. We know now that would not have been the case. That he could not have, no matter how big of a victory, it would have to have had to have been a canine for him to have actually completely crushed the Union Army, and that would not have happened. I doubt that very much would have happened. So yeah, he was looking for a knockout blow in the northern part of the United States, in the north. One reason is he knows that the Western theater is slowly crumbling. At the same time, Rosecrans is moving through Tennessee, moving towards Chattanooga. Grant has already surrounded Vicksburg, getting ready to accept surrender of it one day after Gettysburg ends. It's very much a pressing matter for Lee to move north and hopefully defeat the Union Army there. And the idea is always to hopefully get recognition from other countries. I'm not saying it's a priority, but it will help in the overall scheme of things if Lee can win a major victory in the north.
Alright, a couple more quick questions and I'll let you start. One, was there serious talk of going to Vicksburg instead of Gettysburg? Two, was there this defensive, offensive strategy, or offensive defensive, I guess in this case, to keep the Army intact, like Longstreet sort of said in the movie, or Lee, which was going to be the puncher?
I don't even think Lee knew exactly what was going to be the situation, but in a lot of battles, Lee was the aggressor. If you look, let's run through a couple of them. In that second Manassas, even though Jackson is holding his own, he's using Longstreet as a hammer to knock back the Union Army. He's the aggressor there. At Chancellorsville, he is overwhelmingly the aggressor, even though the Union Army outnumbers him and he divides his force multiple times throughout that battle. Even at Antietam, he's very aggressive, especially on the left, and he has to with the center and the right are defensive. He's a very aggressive commander. I doubt that he would have settled to simply defend a position. He would, but knowing Lee, he's an extremely aggressive commander. I don't think he would have somehow maneuvered a Fredericksburg out of it. Plus, we have to remember this, and this is jumping way ahead, but I think it bears repeating because Lee says this himself, that when his army engages the Union Army around Gettysburg, he was forced to fight. He could not fight a defensive battle in the north because he could not forage off the land because the Union Army was going to see him at every point. They were going to cut him off from all forage he could get. He says this himself, that when he went north, he had to fight an offensive battle because he could not survive long. He needed to defeat them and move on. Once he became engaged, he had to be the aggressor. He couldn't sit back and wait. I think that.
Seminary Ridge, I mean, because he had a piece of high ground. He couldn't sit around and wait for a few days. He had to go.
He did. He could not sit around. I think, like I said, I think that's one aspect of the Battle of Gettysburg that people do not realize. And even if he could have moved, that's not what he believed. He believes he had to be the aggressor in that situation. I'm not saying he couldn't have. And he could have moved somewhere else, but he didn't believe he could. He had to.
Sorry,
No, I was finishing up.
what's in the first few days? It opens up, Stewart goes one way behind the Blue Ridge Mountains, Lee goes the other. What's taking place here?
Well, Lee goes behind the Blue Ridge and he sends Jeff Stewart basically through the Union Army. At one point, Stewart is trapped in amongst the different Union Corps and miraculously makes it out. He gives Stewart some orders. One of them is we need to meet General Ewell at the Susquehanna River. Now that's right there near I believe it's near York, if I'm not mistaken. Meet Ewell at the Susquehanna River. Stewart moves fairly fast. He does get held up. He does stop over in Maryland and sees the ladies and gets hugs and kisses from them. So he does waste a little bit of time, but he is moving decently fast through northern Virginia, Maryland, and on into Pennsylvania. He makes it to the Susquehanna River and finds out Ewell's not there. He had been there, but he's not there now. And Ewell has moved a lot faster than he had anticipated. So this is Stewart's own little what's going on with him. He will go on to Carlisle. He will send troops over to Carlisle, find out where Lee is there. If Lee is there, some Confederate troops are there. He's heard rumors that they're there, and eventually he will come in through kind of the northeast, almost behind Union lines, to get to Lee by July 2nd.
That go to Westminster? I saw something. I remember something about he was supposed to cross the Westminster, or maybe that was supposed to York or something. That's what I'm thinking of. Somewhere I probably read.
I'm not aware of the geography of Pennsylvania. Trying to
Probably just not stuck in my. Okay.
so that's what Stewart is ultimately running around doing. I always hate that people say he was just riding up north getting his name in the papers. Kind of, but in all honesty, he was captured 150 wagons for Lee, and again, Lee's main objective, get supplies, get horses. Stewart is doing that for him, and Stewart knows he needs to do that.
So, people tell me I'm wrong, because I've read all 3 or 4 orders of what it was. From what I've read, he was following Lee's orders to a T.
He was. Lee gave him leeway, as he did with most of his commanders. And Stewart was just doing what Lee expected of him doing. Stewart rode around the Union Army multiple times throughout the Civil War. His most famous was the first one when he does that for the 7 Days battle. But he does it multiple times, so he knows he can do it, and he's always been very successful at it. He's one of the best raiders you can ever find, because he succeeds, and he brings you good information. Well, he brings you great information, and he brings you a whole lot of supplies. So I just never liked that. He's riding up north getting his name in the papers, and that stems from the movie, I know, but people keep repeating it, and I'm trying to tell people that's not exactly the case.
Well, if you're going to believe it. And one of them was, maybe he had 3 of the cavalry brigades with him. I mean, Lee had 2 more brigades. He had scouts with him he could have used.
Yeah, he was. Lee was not void of cavalry. Was he void of experienced cavalry? Yes, but he wasn't void of cavalry. He could have used them to his best ability.
They were capable enough to scout ahead, correct? Because he sent them out the first night out behind the lines and unscouted foreign territory looked at to her.
Yeah, it's people again. They hear one thing, they don't try to understand the whole situation. You're exactly right. Lee had cavalry with him. He could have used them. He did to some extent. But I will grant you this: Stewart was far superior than any other cavalry commander in the Civil War as far as gathering information for you. He is tremendous at that, and so that's what Lee lacks. Lee lacks Stewart's expertise. He doesn't lack cavalry. He lacks Stewart's expertise. So we need to kind of rightly divide that so people understand that Lee is not without cavalry. He does have eyes and ears, but he doesn't have. He's blind in one eye, can't see out of the other. Because his cavalry is not as good as Stewart, who is now disconnected from.
So, tell me about, so we're getting almost to the point. Harrison, the spy, I mean, does he deliver this accurate information as the movie portrays?
Yes, as far as we know, of course, we don't know a whole lot about the man. Kind of an enigma to some extent. He's actually he's very not too far away from where I live. And, I say relatively, about 3 hours north of me, near the Ohio border, just across into Kentucky from Cincinnati. There, of all places. But yeah, he gives Lee accurate information that the Union Army is on the move. Lee had slipped out of Fredericksburg with General Hooker not really knowing where that destination was. Lee had slipped. Let's back up. Stewart, before he starts his ride, will set up a screening movement. So he puts his cavalry out there so that the Union cavalry can't find where the Lee's lines are. And Hooker knows that Lee is moving, but he cannot find out where he's moving. He even suspects that Lee might be moving towards Richmond. He might be falling back. That's one of his hypotheses. And they know that Lee is moving north, and you get the Battle of Brandy Station, the largest cavalry battle of the Civil War, like all cavalry battle during the Civil War. And that was actually a product of the Union Army trying to find where Lee was. That's partially responsible for that battle was the Union Army trying to find exactly where Lee's army is. And Lee had moved a couple of corps almost into the Blue Ridge without Hooker knowing exactly where the destination was. That's how good Stewart was. I mean, that's just amazing when you think about it. I just put out a video about Stewart's screening movement and the genius of Jeff Stewart, how wonderful he was at screening. And so that's very much a product of it. That's why Ewell is able to travel so fast, is because he doesn't have much opposition to him. There's no Union force preventing him to get anywhere. He's having to take out some home guards and some Union troops that are stationed throughout Pennsylvania, but he's not encountering anything big because the Union Army really doesn't know where he's at the moment. He's moving fairly fast. Yeah, that's one reason that Stewart's not able to catch up to him.
Always wondered, Ewell being a corps command, I know that they'd been talking with, maybe 3 corps. I think I even heard that Jackson suggested he'd become a corps commander from what happened to him. I don't know if that's true or not, but why are you letting a brand new corps commander lead this invasion? Or head the invasion?
That I'm not sure. At least historian could probably answer that question better than me. So I won't hazard too far of a guess on it. But I will say that he's got 2 new corps commanders. He's got Ewell and he's got A.P. Hill. He likes keeping Longstreet pretty close to him. He always did. And some people say that he kept Longstreet close to him because Longstreet might have needed Lee's encouraging to be aggressive in some respects. I've heard that thrown out there. But also, Longstreet is, as they say, he's Lee's old war horse, and so Lee trusts him very much so. So he likes being with Longstreet, because again he trusts Longstreet to be able to handle situations. So one reason, and Ewell's a capable commander. He fought with Jackson in the Valley Campaign. Jackson did respect General Ewell. Again, the Valley Campaign kind of endeared him to him. But I don't know why Lee chooses Ewell specifically to go north first. Why that's the situation. Like I said, a Lee historian or a historian of the Battle of the Gettysburg campaign could probably answer that better than me, but that's my 2 cents at least.
So where are we at now?
Let's kind of jump in to that first day, because Lee's forces are fairly spread out that first day, and we see that part of A.P. Hill's Corps, Heath's division, is moving in towards Gettysburg, again, looking for supplies. Most people point to the shoes, but there's supposedly an ample amount of supplies in Gettysburg that Henry Heath is ready to get a hold of, and so he's moving from this, on that road between Chambersburg and Gettysburg. And General John Buford, the Union cavalry have really matured, and they really do mature throughout 1863. Stewart has kind of ran roughshod over them for these first 2 years. 1863 is when Union cavalry become an extremely good fighting force and wonderful at getting information. And one of the best examples is Buford here. Beautifully done. Buford does what Stewart has been doing for the last 2 years, and that's finding the enemy, letting the upper command know where the enemy is and where they need to go. And again, Buford does this beautifully. This is where the Union Army start to best Stewart in every single way. And they're besting him technologically as far as weaponry goes, but they're learning how to become the cavalry that the Union Army needs to win battles. So Buford will engage with Harry Heath outside of the town of Gettysburg. It's simply a delaying action. He knows that the First Corps is near, and if he can hold them off long enough for the First Corps to come up, he'll be able to, the First Corps can engage, and then the rest can start coming in, because we've got the 1st and 11th Corps that are fairly close to Gettysburg, and they can start filing in. So Buford engages. Yeah, go ahead.
This right here, because the movie, I read this, and the movie portrays it too, that you know, when Harry Heath says, well, my boys got the dander up and they wouldn't hold back. Did you ever heard that he really used something along those lines because he didn't want to get this, I guess, hell in a jam because of Lee's orders not to bring on a general engagement?
Yeah.
Let me rephrase it. In the movie, he says, we thought it was militia, but it was cavalry. He said, and my boys wouldn't hold back. And he said, we attacked, and my boys got the dander up, and, so we reformed to hit them again. We couldn't listen to. It's kind of saying that he couldn't hold his army and couldn't control his troops. Did he portray it as that way? That instead of trying to get his, basically trying to save his own self from blaming on a general engagement.
Partially true. The best way I can explain it is that Heath is. From reports and all the information, yes, he did not expect too much of a threat coming from inside the town. Again, the Confederate Army is seeing hometown militias and things like that throughout Pennsylvania. It's not a new thing. So yes, he did envision this not being a very tough force to throw back. So once you throw your troops in, that statement he couldn't hold his men back, it's not exactly the truth. And I don't think he in his reports he didn't convey that either. That's more, I guess that's more Hollywood. These troops outnumber the Union cavalry, and so they start to push them back. And once you do have momentum, it is true you keep going, because and that's something General Jackson always pushed for, and most Civil War commanders like to do, was once you got someone on the run, you kept going. And so that might be where that line comes from, but it's not conveyed in his reports like that. But he did not expect it to be very tough opposition to him.
He's very confused, right? Because I had no idea what lies in front of me, so he doesn't know. He doesn't know. He's fighting with cavalry. He's fighting militia. The whole Federal Army there.
Yeah, and what's worrying Lee is that he hasn't concentrated his force. It's very spread out. And the reason he's spread out is because he doesn't know exactly where the Union Army is. But now he's getting reports from Heath saying, I know I've got the 1st Corps in front of me once he starts engaging 1st Corps troops, because they've got the 1st Corps flags out the units would. So he knows he's got the 1st Corps in front of him. And other reports are talking about the 11th Corps. So he's getting this information, but it's not as smooth as if Stewart had been there. Stewart could have been able to, I'm not saying right around the Union Army at that point, but at least be able to find out where the Army is at the time, how much they're bringing up, and what roads they're taking.
So is his force starting to come back and converge on Gettysburg? Are they just riding to the sound of the gun, so to speak? I mean, because, them big herds can, talking about 50 miles away, conveying messages that far.
What you're going to be having, it's hard to convey messages like that, but they do have the telegraph at this point. They can commandeer telegraph wires and be able to send messages back and forth. So information moves pretty quickly at that point, depending on if you can get to
That was my favorite line, riding to the sound of the guns, or how they were, getting dispatches or getting there as quick as possible.
And we know for a lot of his infantry, or his infantry are, might not know exact locations because if they're moving exactly, but he does know the general areas of his infantry, and so he's able to convey messages back and forth to them, saying, and once he finds out that this is a general engagement, he can't really disengage at that point. He starts ordering all of his troops to converge on the little town of Gettysburg, and what happens on that first day, as Harry Heath is pushing, he gets thrown back by the Iron Brigade. And so he kind of backs off from the Iron Brigade. And as he's kind of waiting for his other brigades to come up, which is one of his brigades is under Pender, one of them is under General Lane, some North Carolinians. Rhodes' division, which is coming down from the northwest, from Ewell's Corps, and he engages part of the 1st Corps on Oak Ridge, and so he's battering against the Union troops on Oak Ridge, and then here comes Harry Heath. He makes his next attack, which is going against McPherson's Ridge. Again, this is I've got an animated battle map that shows you my regiment, what's happening on McPherson's Ridge. And Pettigrew's men flank the Iron Brigade. They go running. They chase them to McPherson's Ridge. They start getting battered up against McPherson's Ridge. They take McPherson's Ridge, but they're unable to go further. They push them all the way to the seminary. And the seminary, the line for the Union Army now is from the seminary north along Oak Ridge, and then to the right they've got where Barlow's Knoll is. The 11th Corps has finally came up, and they're at the north end of town, and so they're looks like a big curve, kind of, with them going from the north to the west. You're at the north, you go west to Oak Ridge, and you go south to Seminary, so kind of like an L-shaped almost.
This far, there was some urban combat in the second place?
Not quite yet. Once the line breaks, and it's really neat from a lot of accounts, and I've tried to kind of piece it all together. The Union line breaks somewhat simultaneously, and it's not a coordinated thing. To the best of our knowledge, it crumbled because Dorsey Pender's division breaks the Union line near the seminary. Actually, it's only one brigade that breaks the Union line on that side. It's some South Carolinians under Colonel Perrin. Robert Rose's division slams into the Union troops on Oak Ridge, and then Jubal Early's division breaks the Union line on Barlow's Knoll, roughly around the same time, and that's when you start seeing men running through the town of Gettysburg, and we do get some urban warfare. One small engagement during the battle that a lot of people that intimately know Gettysburg, it's called the Brickyard fight, and it's on the very north end of town. The Confederates have overrun Barlow's Knoll, and they're pushing towards the town. Jubal Early has held back Gordon's brigade, and he's letting Hayes' Louisianians and Avery's North Carolinians go into the town. And so there's one brigade that's holding out near the northern part of the town of Gettysburg, and it's in a old brickyard.
Brickyard,
And they're able to, because they outnumber them so much, the Confederates simply outflank them and push them on through the town. But that's when you get some urban warfare that transpires throughout the town. Nothing I'm aware of, nothing like Fredericksburg, no. And so at the end of July 1st, Confederate forces have taken the town. They've pushed on towards the southeast of the town. And Union forces have, along with General Hancock, and help from General Hancock and General Oliver Otis Howard, they have secured Colton Hill, Cemetery Hill, and now they are starting to form up on Cemetery Ridge. And General Hancock will start to place troops, and then he hands it off to other commanders as he moves south to kind of confer with General Meade on what to do next. And General Meade had already kind of set up an idea that he was going to set up defensive positions a little bit further to the south. And once General Hancock comes to him and says, "We've got good ground up here. We can defend it real easily, and the Confederate Army is there. We've got a foothold here. Let's bring all troops up there." And so he abandons his idea of setting up his defenses to the south, and he moves up towards Gettysburg. And so that's the night of July 1st, and the Union and Confederate troops start making their way to the town. And Longstreet sets up his men on Seminary Ridge, along with General Rhodes from A.P. Hill's Corps, and Eul's Corps goes to the north, around outside of Culp Hill near Benner's Hill.
$64,000 question. Lee sends the old dispatch, take that hill if practical, but avoid bringing on general engagement, which I think Yule something to tag wads of that. Just can't anybody on that damn staff give a military order or something like that. Good General Ewell has taken that hill alone. People argue all the time, well, Jackson could have, and I say, well, maybe because Jackson would have had half of A.P. Hill's brigade. But could he have taken that without support from A.P. Hill?
He would have had support from A.P. Hill, but I tell this in my biography series on General Hancock. It's asked, I think it's by Rooney Lee, asked General Hancock what would have happened, and General Hancock basically states that there was no way that the Confederates were going to be able to attack Cemetery Hill. And he said General Hancock had set up such a great defense on Cemetery Hill from the Union soldiers that were running back through the town that it would have been a bloody disaster for the Confederates to have even tried to have taken Cemetery Hill.
I read it was like continuous. Tearing down the barrel of 30 cannon, like 10,000 men. He didn't have Johnson's division wasn't even on the field yet.
All Ewell had was Jubal Early right in that general vicinity, although he did have Robert Rhodes' division as well. But Robert Rhodes' division had been battered during that first day. I would hazard to guess that he probably couldn't have got his men to been able to have pushed up against Cemetery Hill. So yeah, you're right. If Ewell was going to attack all he basically had at that moment to attack Cemetery Hill was Jubal Early's brigade, and only 2 brigades of those were relatively fresh, which was Hayes and Avery. So you're going to try to attack it with 2 brigades of men. You're looking, I don't know the exact numbers, but somewhere around 2,000 men, 2,000 to 3,000 men. You're going to try to take Cemetery Hill. It's extremely well guarded. And the one thing you have to remember is that the Union soldiers are desperate at this point. They're a wounded animal. They're going to fight even harder.
So there's one point.
See it.
In Gettysburg, I wish they would have left out some at least talking to Rhodes and Ewell and Early, and can you attack on your end? You hold here, and then he says General Longstreet proposes we move our army and interpose between them and me. Now, I've looked at this, I've read it, I've spent a lot of time studying this. When this story supposedly came out about Longstreet's plan, there was only one road. You would have had to basically do an about face and do a 25-mile road march in the dead of night, hoping you're going to find a road to link up on to get in between Meade and Washington. And the whole time, Meade is going to let you do this. That's militarily infeasible. There's no way that plan was possible. Yeah, he came up with that. What's your thoughts on it? Is this just Longstreet trying to save himself? Well, I don't blame him. Longstreet's not the ultimate. Longstreet did not lose Gettysburg, but he's not this tragic figure people try to make him out to be either.
I love the name of this book. It's called, I think it's called A Lot of Blame to Go Around. And there is. There's not one person we can say. If someone says it's one person, they don't understand history, because every aspect of history is monocausal. There's many causes. It's more than monocausal. Sorry, I misspoke. Everything in history is multi-causal. There's so many causes to different aspects of history, and this was one of them.
Well, this professor, he had it all lined up, and he showed how he said you would have had 3 corps lined up, all in a line, with spread out for 25 miles of column, and they would have ran into 3 corps that was headed straight towards Gettysburg.
And this goes back to what I said at the beginning, that Lee, once he engaged, he really couldn't move until something had been decided. Especially a fresh Union army, if they had just engaged on that first day and he tried to pull back, I can see Hancock urging me to move against Lee, and that's going to make him vulnerable. So, again, I kind of defer to what I said earlier. Once Lee engages, there is no pulling back, and he has to be the aggressor. Unless Meade's going to be the aggressor, ridiculously, Lee has to be.
So we go into day 2 now. Supposedly Lee and Longstreet meet early that morning. Only one of them, we don't really know what was said. It's only got a Longstreet side of it. So what time do you think Lee gave Longstreet his orders to attack?
I don't know the exact time again. A historian of Gettysburg would be able to answer that exactly, but Lee gave him an earlier time. We know he started late today. He started late in the afternoon. Lee wanted him to start earlier. That's
He gave his orders for 1 o'clock. I'm like, there's no way he waited until 1 o'clock in the afternoon to give orders to attack. I don't believe that.
Lee had one of his engineers scout the Union position.
That's the engineer, yeah.
And they knew the grounds, they knew where to go, and he told General Longstreet exactly what he needed him to do. We do know it was an earlier time. Longstreet delays. Now, he does have some troops that are getting into that need to come up. But I think the one historian states that it was simply 1 brigade. It probably wouldn't have made a difference at that point if he could have got the men on the field immediately.
Yeah, so I think it was Law's brigade.
Yeah, I think it was General Evander Law's brigade that was the only one that needed to come up, and he waited a while for him to come up. And I understand caution. You don't know what's ahead of you. But again, Lee's engineer has went and scouted the position, has told you need to move now, and yet you didn't. The Union forces, with General Meade, and I have to give it up to General Meade and General Hancock, specifically General Hancock, but Meade is integral in this as well. They are able to combat General Longstreet beautifully. Now, we'll kind of back up just a moment. What happens is a blunder on the Union side, because Dan Sickles' corps, the 3rd Corps, is set up on their defenses on Cemetery Ridge, and they move forward. They move all the way up to the Emmitsburg Road. This creates kind of a weird kink in the Union battle line of kind of placing the 3rd Corps way out in front of the Union battle lines, and he tells General Meade, it's like, I had to move up because the ground in front of me was higher than me, so I had to take the higher ground in front. And General Meade says something like, well, if that's the case, you'll be going all the way to the Blue Ridge, wouldn't you? It's a kind of funny little interaction. Like I said, I don't know what the exact wording was, but something along those lines. It's not unfounded. Dan Sickles, 2 months earlier, in May, during the Battle of Chancellorsville, had failed to take the higher ground in front of him, which could have made a difference in the battle. So he was doing this off of inexperience, but in this situation, it was not the right decision. So again, there is a reason for why he's moving that way. But he does. He moves his men up to the Emmitsburg Road, and Lee this presents a beautiful situation because now the Union Army is now disjointed. And when Longstreet launches his attack, he easily, well, I won't say easily, it's easier for him to push Sickles away because now the Union soldiers Union reinforcements are having to come from a little bit longer of a distance.
This Confederate attack was one of the greatest 3-hour attacks by any army in history. The attack that they put on the Union right and center.
Someone could argue that. I don't believe it. I wouldn't put this as one of the greatest attacks in Civil War history. Battle of Gettysburg on the second day. You can't, and this goes for every battle, but specifically since we're talking about Gettysburg, the second day's battle, it's very much a brigade fight. It's brigade versus brigade. And it's very much what are these individual brigade commanders going to do next? And it's a beautiful thing to see that the division commanders can only do so much, and now it's left up to these individual brigade commanders commanding their regiments and tell them to go this way, outflank this regiment here. And so we look at, but when General Hancock sends one of his divisions south, just in the nick of time when Longstreet is busting through, Devil's Den, he's going through the wheat field, and Hancock is just right there, is able to throw Longstreet back a little bit and hold on to some ground. General Zook is killed. It's where the famous Irish Brigade moves in. It's a beautiful, beautiful moment during the battles when Hancock's able to hold that. I wish that would have been shown in the movie. I know that Little Round Top is extremely a beautiful story as well, but when Hancock's able to maneuver his troops down and Meade's getting troops from off Culp's Hill and sending them, which is going to hold the Union's left, but the Union's right, which is on Culp's Hill, is barely going to hang on because this fight goes later into the night on Culp's Hill, where these two sides are battling it out, and there's also a fight on Cemetery Hill, which most people, when you talk about the second day at Gettysburg, they leave out. Culp's Hill sometimes more people are now bringing it up, but they leave out Cemetery Hill entirely most of the time. There is an attack by Jubal Early's division to try to take Cemetery Hill after all Longstreet's divisions of Hood and McLaws the attacks have petered out, and Longstreet's actually able to get all the way. I mean, we got Barksdale, we've got Ambrose Wright's brigades make it all the way to Cemetery Hill, Cemetery Ridge, and they just can't stay there. They can't physically stay there. After all of that, there's still fighting going on Culp Hill, and then Jubal Early trying to take Cemetery Hill in the dead of night. It's an amazing story of trying to. These soldiers don't know exactly where the enemy is because they physically can't see them. All they know is that they're shooting at the muzzle blast that's shooting at them. And it's taking part. It's a wild night fight on Cemetery Hill. I've got that one animated. If anyone wants to go check it out.
So a couple of questions. One, with the Round Top, it's pivotal. Is a breaking point? Did they make it out, or because Chamberlain did such a good job of marketing himself? And how did that turn into such a pivotal fight when it first was even an objective?
Well, let's answer the first question first. Chamberlain really was a really good promoter of himself. There's actually some soldiers within the 20th Maine that said it did not happen like he described it. That there wasn't this amazing bayonet charge that was led. So we won't know exactly what happened. We do know that the Union soldiers were able to hold on to Little Round Top. Was it pivotal? Absolutely. Especially when you go and visit the battlefield itself. Because when you go to the battlefield, and I ask anyone to do this when they do visit, go to right about a little bit further south, just a little bit south of the Pennsylvania Monument. And you can look to your right and sort of look to the south and see Little Round Top from there. If Confederates could have taken Little Round Top and could place artillery there, they can throw shells into the rear of the Union Army at that point. It's a really neat aspect to look at physically on the battlefield. So again, I encourage anyone that's listening to this and wants to understand the value of Little Round Top, to stand on Cemetery Ridge, just a little bit south of the Pennsylvania Monument, and you will see Little Round Top, and you'll be able to see the importance of Little Round Top as far as artillery goes, because they would have been able to have shelled the rear of the Union Army at that point.
Okay.
Also that night, again, I talk about Culp Hill. There is basically one brigade holding on to Culp Hill. I've also animated that one, so if anyone wants to check out the night fight at Culp Hill on July 2nd, I've animated that one. One brigade is holding on to Culp Hill as General Johnson's, Edward Johnson's division is pushing for, trying to take it, and they barely get troops there to reinforce Culp Hill. It's during the middle of the night. The Confederates are able to hold on to a little section of it until the next morning. But Cemetery Hill is this big conglomerated mass of 11th Corps troops, and Jubal Early breaks through the line, but again, it's nighttime. Can't tell where anything is, and all of a sudden, General Hancock, again, to the rescue. He sent troops south to Devil's Den, the Wheatfield. Hancock has again saved the day when he sends more troops to Cemetery Hill and are able to throw off Jubal Early's division from Cemetery Hill. Again, another amazing moment by General Hancock, who saves the day for the third time, I do think.
Cavalry engagement that took place late at night on Little Round Top or Big Round Top?
Cavalry engagement?
Yeah, I remember reading that there was a cavalry engagement that took place late that night.
There was some cavalry involved south of Little Round Top, but if I'm not mistaken, that wasn't until the third day.
Okay, that may be what I'm thinking of then. So we've had 200 days of fighting now. who's winning? I mean, from what I've heard, that at this time reports are coming out of Gettysburg of a major Confederate victory.
At the point, Lee has won the first day. He's gained significant ground on the second day. He's battered the Union Army. He's from what he can see and what he believes is that he's bloodied it enough that it's ripe for the taking. The next step is to break that line. And again, it's said all the time, but this was the mentality at the time. You've hit both flanks. Now you can hit the center. They've had to reinforce the flanks. You've got to hit the center.
He said that the weak point is in the center. They have command of the high ground, so the weak point is in the center. I love that part when he compared me to That is one of my favorite parts of the movie.
Yeah, it's but we have to remember there's roughly three, possibly four if you want to count it, 4 different engagements on that third day. Pickett's charge is just one of them. Pickett's charge, of course, everybody is. I won't dive horribly into that because most people know the mechanics of it.
Was it Pickett's wife that did such a good job of marking him? Because we forget that Johnson, Pettigrew, and General Trimble were involved in that. General Trimble actually has to have a leg amputated. Did the wife just do a good job of marking him?
His wife did a good job of marketing him, but also Virginia was able to market themselves. This was Virginia's moment to them. And so that the lost cause and Virginia being a main proponent of the lost cause, these Pickett's charge as their high point. And so we can say Pickett's wife did. She absolutely did market him. However, it was Virginia and Pickett's wife that kind of made Pickett's charge seem like it was just Pickett. But you're right. General Trimble and General Pettigrew, who's Pettigrew was commanding General Heath's brigade. Heath had been taken out on the first day, and so he's going to be leading the charge. He's going to be sending his troops into battle on the third day.
Folks, that's about lost off. Let me tell you one time are they ever go on the Southern Historical Society? Those papers up in the Lost Cause. Of course, I'm going to check it out. And I guess it's somebody just outside class. Sure, there is some Lost Cause stuff in there. But I found some primary sources from lieutenants and even after-action reports from the Battle of Gettysburg. It's just good stuff. This is not something you're going to find in everyday history books. There's a lot of stuff you can find in the Southern Historical papers.
I was just going through the Southern Historical Society papers right before we started recording.
Oh, really?
It's the Southern Historical Society papers have a lot of great primary sources, as you said. You do have to filter through some lost cause and some BS that's put out through there, but there are some wonderful first-hand accounts that we wouldn't have had if we didn't have the Southern Historical Society papers. So I'm a huge proponent of that. But you're right. Even with Pickett's charge, we have Pettigrew and Trimble, who are also on the left of Pickett, and there's also some brigades on the right that are making some attacks. Even some Floridians are on the right that make some half-hearted attempts toward Cemetery Ridge. So this is much more than just Pickett's men. And then, so we talk about Pickett's charge, and then we also need to remember that there's a fight going on at Colts Hill. So Johnson is re-engaging the Union Army on Colts Hill on the third day. He's done it the night before. He picks right up again on July 3rd. He tries to take Colts Hill again. This time he's moving against more than just one brigade. Now there's more Union troops on that side, and they finned off General Johnson. Then the third engagement that happens on the third day is Stewart, who is coming in behind the Union Army. He gets.
Part of the attack. I mean, I've heard people argue this both ways, that Stewart's army's supposed to go around, and when Pickett busts through, they're going to be there to just mop them up as like shock troops, so to speak. I mean, that's what's happening, or is this something totally different?
That's a little bit of an exaggeration. Stewart was riding around again. If he had a couple of objectives, and you can read Lee's orders to him. But one reason that Jeff Stewart is riding around the rear of the Union Army is, again, trying to gain more information. He's supposed to engage troops. Undoubtedly, he is. He's supposed to engage, and if you look at the East Cavalry field, it's pretty far away from any kind of engagement at Pickett charge. It's not, and plus he would have. I don't know of any direct road other than the Baltimore Pike that would have brought him in, and then he would have been completely surrounded by Union forces. Would that have worked? No. This is a lot. This East Cavalry battlefield, much of what Stewart is doing is trying to gain some information. That's one of the main things he's doing.
But then on this third day, he's throwing everything he's got left at him.
Yeah. He's and then to the south. This goes back to that little cavalry engagement that was to the south. That happens a little bit later that day. So there's a lot of movement on the battlefield, and Lee is throwing a lot, like you said, Lee is throwing a lot of stuff at the Union line, hoping that it breaks. But it's strong. General Hancock and General Meade have really put together one tough defensive line.
So yes, I was reading this. I forgot what the article. Saw. There was one that I saw read the day before. It was about General Barksdale. This guy called him Longstreet, stepped void and yearning at the lead all day, wanting to go in. He was talking about how he rode on horseback. That's what I was going to bring up earlier. Why are they always riding on horseback? It's got, the other one was on that third day. It's all still gives, or cemetery air breaks, and Lee holds his ground, and Meade's army flees back to Pine Creek to set up. I mean, Lee can claim victory now. He holds that spot and wait and see what orders he gets from Richmond as far as diplomatic negotiations. He's too battered to follow. I mean, what's he do then? Go home?
I guess that's the $1 million question. What's going to happen next? If Lee is able to break the center of the line, that also doesn't mean that Cemetery Hill is going to fall. And Cemetery Hill is going to be able to look down their artillery right on the Confederates that have broken through. And again, there is no support, so even if you do break the line, can you follow them? It's not going to be too much. Stewart would have had to have defeated Custer, which he didn't, to have made any progress with the cavalry coming around and mopping up any troops. So there's way too many factors. If Lee had somehow, let's just say he did win and the Union troops moved south, he's again got to, and again, there's no battle of annihilation. He's not going to be able to completely destroy them. He's going to have to pursue them. And then he's going to have to fight again, another offensive battle that his troops are already bloodied after. And he's probably, knowing Lee's aggressive behavior, he might try to go after him, but he's going to have to definitely neutralize the Union cavalry, which is still prominent and still able to hold, that kind of force him to go down certain roads and will be given the Union Army information. It would have been a very tough campaign for Lee to have succeeded, even if he had won.
If Cleveland's
been over. Say it again.
if Lee wins Gettysburg, if they win the war, I mean, I know the Union doesn't win the war for them, but does that prevent them from losing the war, I guess, so to speak? Because Meade's army is scattered, and draft riots are taking place in New York, as my buddy said, and the only army you've got to suppress these riots is the Army of Northern Virginia. I mean, does if Lee win Gettysburg, does the Confederacy win the war?
No. I think it's pretty easily described. No, there's just because they win Gettysburg does not mean they win the war. For one thing, the very next day, France able to take Vicksburg. There's no reason to stop. And again, Lee wins. He's still going to have to fight the Union Army of the Potomac, and hopefully try to destroy them if possible. But again, it's probably not going to happen.
So people attack or criticize General Meade a lot for his actions after Gettysburg. He should have followed and pursued harder. Well, he just lost 30% of his army. He's new to command. He's mauled up pretty bad. And in the back of his mind, he's got to be thinking he's chasing Robert E. Lee, waiting for him to make a mistake. And stick his foot out, he's going to chop it right off. I mean, you think he gets so much criticism for his actions after? I mean, because not to mention the tenacious rearguard fire being put up by people like Johnson Pettigrew.
Could Meade have moved more aggressively and probably have stopped Lee from. He could have made it a lot tougher for Lee. I think that Lee had enough. He was wily enough. They called him the Gray Fox for a reason. I think he would have been able to have held off Meade, but Meade could have caused a whole lot of damage. So there is some criticism that I would level at Meade for not pursuing further, because. And one reason he may not have, I'm not saying this one, I'm just saying we need to kind of think about it. One reason that he may not have is simply because one of his best commanders and one he trusts a whole lot, General Hancock, is not there. General Hancock has been wounded on the third day. He gets taken to a hospital, and he's out of there. He goes to Norristown to recover. So he's not there, and that's a big problem for me when you lose one of your best commanders. Look at Lee. He loses Jackson. That's his right arm. Hancock is Meade's right arm.
I heard that for weeks after that, even maybe a month after, there were still reports of a Confederate victory from Gettysburg.
Mm-hmm. I actually did a video on that we have. We have. It's called "The South Won Gettysburg?" ? And there are tons of reports that came in saying that the Union had lost and Robert E. Lee had won. I use that description to talk about how how rumors get started and how rumors kind of proliferated throughout the Civil War. General Grant died like 5 or 6 times during the Petersburg campaign. If you didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's where a lot of those soldiers will they'll make these reports out that so and so died, this general died, and one of them was Grant. Grant apparently passed away I don't know how many times during Petersburg, but it also goes to show that there's a lot of people that just cannot accept that they have lost a battle. It pains them to think that they may have lost a battle and lost a big battle like that. And so that's what I talk about. It's not all about Gettysburg, but it does go very in depth on Gettysburg and mostly around Petersburg. So those two. But I highly recommend going and watching that because it does talk about all those reports that Gettysburg was a Confederate victory and how anyone can possibly imagine that. And this is soldiers talking about it afterwards. These are people This is people taking part in picket charge that said that we whooped them. Not that they did it in that, not that they did it in that in part of the battle, but they had won. You know, just because they got pushed back from that attack didn't mean they didn't win. That's kind of their mentality.
I mean, I think people, they still argue, well, Lee won the campaign, he just lost the battle. I'm like, what do you mean by that? They're like, well, he got some horses and metal, and that doesn't win the campaign. Well, he lost a third of his army.
There's actually a very well-known historian who, and of course, when I'm trying to talk about him, I don't remember him now. I can't remember his name now. I know it as well as I know my own. But he actually argues that, and it's the way he words it. It makes it sound a lot better than what I'm saying it. That Lee believes he won the campaign. Lee's objective was get supplies, what he does. Stewart is able to get him supplies. He's able to get some horses. He's able to get supplies and bring them back into Northern Virginia. So he succeeds in that campaign, in that aspect of the campaign. And as far as military conflicts, one of his goals is that he needs to be able to bloody the Union Army enough that they won't be able to operate. And he does that. Although the Union Army does move into Northern Virginia, there's not much that happens between July 3rd, 1863, and the next summer, and the next May of 1864, when Grant comes in and does the Overland Campaign. He succeeded in those two goals of the campaign. So if you look at his goal when he started out the campaign, he accomplished both of them. Now, we know he didn't win the battle, but through his own personal goals for the campaign, he succeeded. So when you look at it like that, there's an argument to be made. And of course, I'm not saying he won the Battle of Gettysburg. I'm saying that what he set out to do, he actually did. So something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, when I first heard it, it was, the craziest thing I've ever heard, and after listening to the guy explain a little bit, I was like, okay, I kind of see where you're going with this, he still got a lot of men to do it, accomplish that. And that was great. I think that's all the questions I've had for you. Is there anything you wanted to add to it?
No, I think we covered it pretty well.
All right, man. We'll be back in 2 weeks. We'll talk tomorrow.
That sounds great, buddy.
Okay.